Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And welcome back. As we mentioned prior to our commercial break, our first conversation this morning will be with the Special Envoy for Families and Children. We have with us in studio this morning, Rosanna Briceno. Good morning.
Good morning.
Briceno.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So there are a number of issues that we'd like to tackle with you briefly this morning during this particular segment. And perhaps we can begin with the 16 Days of Activism. I know the month of November is usually set aside, is annually designated as the month where we raise awareness for issues involving women and activism to end gender-based violence and what have you. Let's begin there. What are we looking at this year in terms of either a theme or any particular initiative being undertaken by your office to raise awareness?
Okay, thank you for having me here again. Yes, November has always been identified as the month to highlight and bring awareness to women, and especially gender-based violence against women and their human rights. So this year, what working collaboratively, because I think that was my first thing that I said in the beginning, that my work as Special Envoy is for advocacy and creating partners, working in collaboration with other organizations. So I, of course, reached out to the Women's Commission and a number of other organizations that, per usual, because that's the word that they like to use, no? Per usual, we do this every year. And I think the theme that they came up with from the Women's Commission, and because there's so many themes out there, so we try to narrow down to make it Belize adaptable, right? So the theme for this year is Me and You, from 16 days to 365, End Violence Against Women Now. The first time I heard that long theme, I said, man, every theme in Belize has to be a long statement. It just can't be end violence now, you know, it has to go on and on and on. But I get it. This time I did. I did some research on my own, and like you specifically mentioned as we started talking, November. Why November? Well, I asked myself the same thing, why November? But it seems that November, it's this whole, it's an international campaign that began in 1991. And it started because it's used to highlight the link between violence against women and human rights, especially with the emphasis on women's human rights. And it officially began on November 25th. Thereafter, for example, today, 2021 commemorates the 50th anniversary of this global campaign. So it's a worldwide thing that's promoting awareness. And what I think hit me the most was with the 365 added to the theme, is that every day we're supposed to be working and promoting awareness. And when reading it on the data, it said that the idea for 365 means that what we should be able to do as a country and as a whole global, to promote global awareness too, is that every month, every 25th of every month, we should highlight it as an Orange Day, which the color orange became synonymous with women against violence, the whole 16 days of activism. And really, orange is supposed to promote that the idea that women should be free of gender-based violence.
Yeah.
So that's why the color orange. And in reality, it's an everyday battle.
Right.
So it shouldn't just be on November 25th every year. It should be every month, every day. But specifically, the theme is highlighting that awareness that maybe, you know, what we should be looking at is that, okay, every 25th of every month, let's have an orange day.
Yeah.
Just to keep it going, you know, that we're still pushing for the end, because we're looking at for an end to gender-based violence. And it's gender-based violence encompasses a lot of everybody, both males and females. But in this 16 days of activism, it's specifically geared towards women's human rights.
You're right in that when we think about gender-based violence and violence against women, it's usually attached to the 16 days of activism.
Right.
That's when we take a lot of time to focus on violence against women, and unfortunately, the period is also infamous in Belize for cases and severe cases of gender-based violence coming up in the media. But in terms of the mechanisms to bring awareness to those persons on the ground that are actually in these situations, how effective are those mechanisms in getting out this awareness on a monthly, weekly, daily basis?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't know if it's sheer coincidence or just craziness, you know. But yes, you are right. Every November, there's a sensational killing.
Yeah.
It has become a pattern that definitely needs to be broken. It's crazy when you look back at the deaths of young women. You know, it's a personal thing for us too in Orange Walk, when a young lady was killed in November. Just everybody knew this young woman in the community, and we in Belize, we try not to, you know, they say not call out the dead name and things like that. But this was an amazing young woman coming up, you know. She had a child, her name was Christy. And she hit, her death hit and touched everybody in our community. Likewise, when there's a death in any other community, Belize is too small. We know each other, or we know of each other. And we make it a business for know of each other. So when these things happen, it hits home, you know. So it's incredible that that we're still looking, and it's not even just sensationalizing the deaths, but on the radio yesterday, listening to a talk show. They were talking about the media and the approach to sensationalizing violence, you know.
Yeah.
And it's I think even the media has to look at ways of how they are presenting these things, because sometimes what we end up re-victimizing people or making it as an entertainment, when it's not entertainment. It's something that needs to be addressed in our country.
If you allow
I
me
think
to,
I didn't answer what you said. I got carried away, but
if you allow me
you
to throw this in there,
Go ahead, sorry.
just to expand on what you're saying, Special Envoy. So while there is a professional responsibility on the part of us as media practitioners, I am looking at the issue as an all of society approach. Because while what we put out there perhaps influences the mindset of some people who are gullible or who are easily impressionable, you also have other people who have key roles in raising the awareness. So if we're saying, for instance, that certain things begin at home, then the interaction between man and woman has a bearing on the child. right? When you look at the classroom setting, for instance,
Right.
if you have a male educator or a female educator, their outlook and their perspective and the way how they treat the students, either male or female, also has an effect on how you look at
Yep.
gender interaction and that sort of stuff. So I'm looking at it from the perspective that each of us has a responsibility. I'm not defending what we do or what we don't do as the media. I'm simply saying that, look, all of us need to look at where we are in the bigger picture that we're moving towards ending GBV, right? And that there's a role for each of us to play at all levels.
I totally agree with you because I'm not picking on the media today. I just use that as an
Which is a fair
example.
example, which is a perfectly fair example.
But yes, it has to, we like to say it has to start at home because the home is where the child grows up
Yeah.
and learns behaviors. But we are very stereotypical too.
Yeah.
So we expect a girl to behave in a certain way and a boy to behave in a certain way, you know, that macho thing and that saving the princess kind of thing, you know. But
Yeah.
yes, there's school, there's the church, the community, there's the workplace. All of these need to put efforts to ensure that we're not being stereotypical, we are being open, we're respecting each other, because that's where it begins. The level that the disrespect, I would say, for human beings in Belize has escalated to the point that a life has no,
We look at it as though it has no value.
like there's no value anymore. They're just killing each other. They're just, especially with the gang situation and crime, and then the crime against women, the violence against women and children. Because when the women are in a position that they're being, or they are in a situation that they're being abused and there's violence in the family, this is what the children are learning. So they grow up with this thinking it's okay, and it becomes a vicious cycle. When we're always hoping that the school becomes the safest place for our children.
Yeah.
And yes, you said the approaches that a male and a female teacher take may be different, but that comes with how we were taught, how we grew up, and that can change. It's a matter of educating, resensitizing our teachers and our children. The school is supposed to be the first place where they learn how to get along, all the character values, all the character education and the spirituality. But I don't know, maybe Jesus has left our classrooms. We need to bring him back.
How has COVID-19 and the stresses that come with that, economy, job losses, etc., how has that increased the reports of domestic violence, if any at all? What sort of effect has that had?
It has escalated. I was reading through a paper there, and I might not be sure, but I think for 2021, the cases are out of order. 875 cases of violence, and that's because that's just the ones that were reported.
Yeah.
We have many, many more that were not reported. Or they were reported, the women or the men or whoever went to make a report, but they went home and things get calm, and and so, drop the charges. And this is a problem, a big problem, because then 2 months later, 3 months later, it happens again. There's no recorded evidence because that's thrown away. So these are some things I think that we may need to look at in terms of policies and reform and things, and that would come with a lot of training. This will not happen overnight, where maybe once the woman makes a report, then it's recorded and it's kept. in a file and say, so if something happens to that person a year later or 2 years
have a
later,
point
there
of
was already a
reference.
pattern, there was already something filed. This isn't something that just happened yesterday. There is evidence to show that this situation began and it has escalated to where maybe they're dead, you know. So I know there's a lot that needs to be done.
It's interesting that we'd be discussing this within the context of the pandemic, simply because I could recall last year at the onset of COVID-19 and the fact that we had lockdowns and prolonged period of time where the family has to occupy the same shared space because of either joblessness, because the students can't return to the classroom, so now they have to be administered classes virtually from their living rooms or from home or what have you. It creates a situation or an environment where, for instance, if both parents go to work and the child goes to school, they will only come together, for instance, in the evening time, which is, you know, enough time for a meal, discussion, go to bed, start the same cycle again the following day. But during the period of the lockdown, everybody is at home. So certain behavior, certain things that you would ordinarily overlook because you're not in each other's physical presence that often, now gets amplified. And so it creates a situation where there's perhaps friction between man and woman, and then the cases begin to go up. The number of reported cases of gender-based violence. And this was, I wouldn't say foretold per se, but it was expected, because I could recall some of the people from the various government ministries, human development was one of them, who said, okay, well, look forward to seeing such a rise in the number of cases because of this particular situation.
And you are exactly right. Because of COVID, it compounded the situation. It got really, really bad because the frustrations were building up. You're talking about losing a job. The children at home now full time. Mother has become, and even the father have become the teachers. And in many, many cases, the parents don't know how to teach their children. And not to knock my fellow teachers, because I think they have done, and most of them have done an excellent job providing that online, and the packages at the beginning was all packages. It's a lot of work to put things together. But then you send home a package and then the parent has to be the teacher and going through the packages. And so a lot of the children that got packages or actually have access to online is very, very small compared to being in school face to face. So the situation in the house basically became toxic. We have some parents that were pleading, please open the schools, you know, we need to send back these children, and the children are losing out. And then that's creating, like you said and you mentioned, the stresses, you know. They become in your face now. It's just too much. You're not used to being at home all the time and there's no money coming in. The children are hungry. You have to pay bills. I mean, you could imagine that frustration building up, and then somebody has to find ways of releasing this tension, and it's negative. It's a negative.
It's a reality check that perhaps many of us were not prepared to face, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, when each member of the household goes about his or her own business on a daily basis, we tend to not really focus on the little things that would irk us, in a manner of speaking. But when you're in a communal space, you're already trying to figure out, okay, if I'm on pantry, we need to be able to ration out the food. If I've lost my job and I'm getting $150 every 2 weeks, we need to figure out how we're going to pay the bills. But then you have a child, or you have kids who are demanding certain attention from you, whereas if you are at work, things are different. They'd be in school, you know, it's a different dynamic or scenario. But now you're at home and you have to face this. And it's a kind of reality check, like I said, many of us did not see that coming at all. Who would have thought that a pandemic would have essentially changed the way we lived? We're only now trying to find a sense of normalcy, but for the better part of a year and a half, things have altogether been topsy-turvy.
And it has, and there have been many deaths. Fathers have died, the breadwinners, mothers have died, you know, the grandparents have died. We, in our Belizean society, we look to our grandparents to help us with our children, you know. Where will we leave the child? We prefer to leave the child with the grandparents than with a babysitter. So the death, I think that has touched everybody in Belize. It has hit home. Like you said, who would have thought that this pandemic would have turned our world upside down?
Yep.
The sense of normalcy, I don't know if we will ever have that. Ever. We're sitting in a talk show wearing masks. Seriously.
You read my mind.
You know, does this feel normal? No, it doesn't. And in the home, imagine the situation where there's no income coming in, you're waiting for the pantry, the 150 every 2 weeks. It's just setting up the whole society for failure.
Yeah. And it leads to a domino effect of unfortunate circumstances and even casualties.
Right.
We've seen in the past 3 months, I would imagine, some 6 to 7 youths, children,
Yes.
young men, but children nonetheless, that have been gunned down. A lot of it, perhaps, due to the fact that they don't have that safe space to go to, that safe
true.
space that was once there, that in terms of schools. This current administration, in seeking to address the issue of crime and violence, is planning to take somewhat of an integrated approach in terms of involving various ministries. How much is your office in that conversation in ensuring that they are pressed, in ensuring that these solutions actually come about, and that the children of Belize remains a priority in these solutions?
Unfortunately for the Prime Minister, I am married to him. So he will hear this every day.
Yeah.
Because of my office. And he put me there. So I said, be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah, you might very well get it.
But yes, because of what my office is about. It's for advocacy. It's for the development of families and children. So the approach that I have taken really is a collaborative one. The office does not provide any services. The office has no money to give. But if we collaborate with human development, with the other NGOs out there that are responsible for education, for crime prevention, for jobs and health, I think in that way, with that collaborative approach, the Plan Belize can be held accountable. Because it will not take the police to fix the problem. In many cases, with all due respect to the police are the problem. And I'll put my foot in my mouth, but this is the reality of the situation. So we need to start from the top, where things needs to be changed. Some reforms need to be put in place, because for the prevention of crime, it will not take one entity, one organization. It will take a collaborative, a holistic approach to the prevention of crime, beginning from the home, in the schools, in the churches. You know, I always feel that church should be a safe place where you're taught to love one another and all of that, the good values, you know, and it reinforce that in the schools and in the community. But that sense of loss, of losing all of these values, is in our in our country right now.
When you look
So-
at, as you've mentioned, the church has long since been the pillar of the community, right? It's almost like a market where everybody comes to buy their produce and their food stuff and what have you. Well, everybody goes to church, or used to go to church
Yeah.
to cleanse themselves spiritually. But in the process of so doing, you get to learn more about your brother or your sister. And so there's a respect and an appreciation for each other that was created by the church. When you look at what is happening today, for instance, you don't really have that sense of unity, simply because we have moved away from certain values or
Right.
certain institutions, if I may, that were put in place for us to be able to realize that as a people, we ought to remain together. So people don't really go to church like that anymore. You find out that their value systems change
Right.
altogether.
Right.
And what you hold dear to you by way of your morals and what you were raised with may be totally different from mine
Yeah.
or his. So now when you come into one space, you find that we're not on the same wavelength. Whereas the church used to bring us together and say, okay, well, this is the word, you have an interpretation of the word, but at the end of the day, we all walk away and say, okay, you know what, I appreciate Paul, I appreciate Rosanna. We no longer do that. So now you find that individual thinking in that manner takes us in different direction. I was looking at this the other day because in a chat group that I'm in, a young man raised the question, how are we raising our children to be able to emulate the good things about us as parents? It's a very interesting question, and I pose that same question to you in your capacity as a special envoy. Because at the end of the day, it goes back to what we're saying, value systems, right?
Right.
How do we impart that knowledge that our parents shared with us to our kids when there are all these other influences that come to play? You don't have kids in school right now. They're on their device. They're on their device. They're open to the world of everything else that's on social media.
Yes, they are.
Let me
And
put that
that's
to you.
tough. That is a tough question because everybody grew up with different values. When we look at our community in our Belize, we're talking just Belize, there's different ethnic groups. And everybody has their own traditions and values that they want to impart to their children. Not to divert too much, but visiting in PG, these women were keen on teaching their young daughters and granddaughters the art of stitching, the embroidery, and they sit as a family, you know, and they have to do this because they're afraid of losing it. I know in the Garifuna culture, or the language, it's rich. They're not ashamed of speaking in the Garifuna language because it's something that they don't want to lose.
Yeah.
Going to the mestizos right now, everybody's looking for their roots. You know, they're trying to, where do I belong? Where did I come from? And when I'm thinking of the mestizo community, it's the approach that it could be good and bad. We have good traditions and bad traditions, and in every other ethnic group in Belize, that machismo approach, you know, where the man is the head of the house and the women are supposed to just cook and wash and not say nothing, just no look for me too hard today. That has I think has escalated to the point that there's no respect anymore, and that sense of our values have been lost. And you said rightly, our children are stuck at home right now on their devices, some getting exposed to God knows what, because there's little control that parents have, you know. And in a way, they say, you know what? They see their child on the device and they're like, oh, he's busy, barami, so left and right there. When that might not be the best thing to do, you need to find out, what is my child?
Yep.
Why is he spending so many hours on this device? And they get caught up in this cyber world. There's a lot of things going on. I remember one of my sons, the youngest one, he had no reason to leave his room. He was on his device all day. I'm thinking, okay, we're doing online. But there's a whole world out there, and they're talking to people, and we have no clue who they're talking to. So when it comes to how will I pass down my values to my children, that's an individual thing that we need to look at, and look at ourselves, self-reflect, and start with us. What am I doing to help my child grow up with the values that I want him or her to grow up with? These young parents nowadays that I see, I admire them. Some of them are really trying to instill good values in their children, and they're going by the book. And we're saying, I don't raise 3 pigs, I'm not an dead. By chewing on a chicken bone or something. But no, the child is not ready to eat solid foods yet, and things like that. And it goes the same way with raising our children. They need to know what the rules are at home, what the rules are in society. Everywhere you go, there's workplace rules, there's church rules, there's all kind of rules. And if our children don't know to follow rules, they will never get ahead in life. So it starts from small.
Below the surface of ethnicities and the ethnic brackets, there's also social brackets, economic brackets. And it is safe to admit that there are some disparities in those areas when it comes to communities, when it comes to different families. And admittedly, oftentimes these disparities, they create the type of values we may have as a family. They help to develop it. So while one family and parents may value getting good grades, another family may value the art of hard work.
Right.
While one family, perhaps on a lower social and economic bracket, might value the hunt to get food, the hunt to get finances on a daily basis. I believe that these disparities must also be taken into consideration and must also be addressed in order to create perhaps what is a level playing field for access to all. Because while one family may have access to internet for their children, that's not the reality of all the families and children in Belize.
And that's why it's important that our children get back to the classrooms. That's the only thing that will level this playing field. Because you are right, the disparities are in our faces every day, and we are faced with them. But when they go in the classroom, it's different. They're in the same classroom. They have the same subjects being taught to them at the same time. They're leaving with the same level of education. Education is key. We like to say education is the way to go, but education is not accessible to everybody. I know I'll pay for this, but it's important that when we talk about free education, that we look at the details of that. Because free is not free, it's costing somebody.
Nothing is ever free.
Nothing is free in this world, and I always say that, I always tell my teachers, that my students, nothing in this life is free. You have to work for it. And when you work for it, you appreciate it and you value it. So in the reality of freeness is not free. You have to work hard to maintain your grades. If you get a scholarship, for example, you have to work hard to make sure that you understand what's being taught to you. So it's not a free for all either. To make it more, I think, equal, we need to ensure that if we say we're getting free education, that we look at everything that encompasses what is free. Because you may be able to get into the classroom because of a scholarship or because of the free education concept. But then again, when there's no uniforms, I need books, I need to be able to get a meal every day. So it's that whole approach that we need to take as a community. This is where the feeding programs come in. This is where we need to look at how to help the children stay in school. They not just start, more boys tend to drop out. Why you think? Because the boys, once they find out that they can make money and they start making money, they don't want to go back to school and waste time there when I make some money right now. This is the bread and butter issues. So we need to make it, give them an incentive, motivate them to stay in school. And that's why I totally agree with the ministry and the Minister of Education that we need to work hard to get these children back to school. We're losing them. We're losing them to gun violence, to gang violence, to crime. Their safe space should be the schools right now. So that vaccination, I think it's super important. The faster we get our children vaccinated, the faster the schools will open and we can get back to that some sense of normalcy.
Allow me to ask one final question as we wrap up. We're quickly running out of time. But yesterday we saw the release related to the Curriculum Reform Steering Committee. I understand that you are a member of that committee. Would you speak just briefly in summary to what it is that your office is adding to that conversation in terms of steering the curriculum reform?
Okay, well, I was invited to be a part of it, and we're having our first Zoom meeting tomorrow. I was able to attend a Zoom meeting on Monday with the whole overall, with UNESCO and the overload of the curriculum. So I think what Dr. Zabane wants the partners to do, because it's different people that have been invited to be a part of this, is to look at it and see where is our curriculum? How does it look? How can we strengthen it? As an educator now, I'm looking on a personal basis, not my office, my experience with the curriculum. I think I can add to that conversation. I can, being in there, manipulating that curriculum, making it work for my school, my environment, because the curriculum is a general curriculum. You have to adapt it. You have to make it work for your school in your area, because their resources are limited. So I think that's the approach that the minister wants to take, and I'm ready to discuss, because I know what's the necessities and the needs that we have in Orange Walk, for example. And going back to the 16 Days of Activism very, very quickly,
Sure. No problem.
the Women's Commission did put a package together. It's a resource packet. I think they were talking about it. And in there, they have a lot of ideas on how people can get involved in the community, in the workplace, in the faith-based organizations like the churches, the media. And just because we are on the media, I'm going to highlight one thing.
Sure.
It says what the media can do is to develop guidelines for reporting on GBV, inclusive of consequences for not following them. So what you do is advocate for the prevention of gender-based violence as a media. And I can send you a packet. I'm going to have someone from my office, my team, send you the packet so you could look over it and review it and see what can we do for this month and next month, every month. It's not,
Certainly.
it's 365 days, remember? It's not just one day, November
All year
25th.
round.
It's all year round. We want to end gender-based violence in Belize, and it will not take one day. And it will not take one organization. It's going to be a collaborative church, home, school, workplace. Everybody needs to get involved.
Well, thanks for bringing this conversation full circle for us in terms of, the issues that we've been able to discuss, beginning with gender-based violence. So we look forward to hearing from you in the weeks ahead as we continue to look at the 16 days of activism and what it means to Belizean men, women, and children. Right. So thanks again for having joined us this morning.
You're
we
welcome.
appreciated the conversation.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a commercial break at this point, and when we return, we're going to be joined by members of the Belize Diabetes Association as we embark on our second topic for the morning. Stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.